Senate roll call, day 12, Tuesday, February 27th. Anderson. Here. Baldwin. Here. Barlow. Present. Beitman. Here. Boner. Here. Bouchard. Here. Brennan. Here. Case. Present. Cooper. Here. Dockstetter. Here. Ellis. Here. French. Here. Purphy. Here. Garou. Here. Hicks. Here. Hutchings. Here. Ide. Here. Jones. Here. Kinski. Kolb. Present. Landon. Here. Larson. Here. McEwen. Here. Nethercott. Here. Pappas. Rothfuss. Here. Salazar. Here. Schuler. Here. Scott. Here. Steinmetz. Here. Kinski. Excused, Mr. President.
Here.
And Pappas. Excused. 29 present, 2 excused.
Prayer by Father Thomas Conklin Jr., St. Mary's Cathedral.
Let us pray. Heavenly Father, be with us this day as we finish addressing bills on third reading and as we address bills sent to us from the House. When you worked to create the world in 6 days, you found the rhythm and a pace that built upon your prior actions. First light, then sky, then sea, earth, and vegetation, then the sun, moon, and stars, then the creatures of the sea and sky, and then the creatures of the earth, and ultimately human beings. Help us to continue to build like you on the prior work that we have done, finding our rhythm and pace, so that in the remaining days of this session, we may create the legislation which benefits our great state and expresses an aspect of us being co-creators with you in the act of governance, having dominion over all creation. Bless our day, fill it with many accomplishments, and allow us to be aware of your presence and grace. We ask this in all things, in your holy name. Amen.
Senator Brennan, lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Reading, correction, approval of journal.
Mr. President, your Journal Committee reports that the Journal of February 26, 2024 has been read and recommends it be approved. Senator Larson, Chairman.
Any objections? Being none, the report is adopted. Doctor for the day is Donald Kirk, MD, Family Medicine, Star Valley. No nurse. Today in history, 1952, the U.S. Senate voted 45 to 44 to return to a committee a bill providing statehood for Alaska. Quote for the day: when people say they can't see anything good in you, hug them and say life is difficult for the blind. So, fellow senators, join us to share some of her work is Wyoming's 9th Poet Laureate, Barbara Smith, who was appointed by Governor Gordon in October. Barbara taught for 38 years at Western Wyoming Community College, where she brought various visiting writers to the school's campus to meet and inspire students. She is an accomplished writer herself and just released her full-length poetry collection titled Putting Name on It. Went to her at the Arts Alliance Awards the other night. She is a dynamic speaker and actually kind of hits the heart, so we're going to ask her to do one or two of her poems. Please help me and welcome Ms. Smith to the Senate.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to introduce myself as the new Poet Laureate. I have been told that I'm the first one from over in southwest Wyoming. And so I thought I'd read a couple of things about my part of the country here. I've lived in Rock Springs, Wyoming, which has been a boom and bust kind of a community, and we survive quite well, and most people really get their back up when people talk about Rock Springs in a negative way, you know. We are in the high desert. And so I'm gonna read this poem about the immigrant coming to this area and the similarities between the pioneers then and the people who have been uprooted from their lives and end up suddenly in Sweetwater County, called Another Saturday Night. Back then, during the first boom, it was a company town, full of company houses, all alike, row after row, coming down from the mine, number 1 or number 3. Everyone appreciated the company. It was better than tents. The men would come home, tramping down their row to their houses every night, to eat, to sit in a chair and read the paper until dark, except on payday, when they would stop for a drink and come roaring home, full of whiskey, ready to do their duty another Saturday night, and couldn't find their houses. They all looked alike. On one row, the women got together. Each painted her front door a different color, so her man could get home Saturday nights with some of the pay. They named it Rainbow Avenue, a lovely thought in a dusty world. The town grew and things changed, but not much. City fathers changed the name of Rainbow Avenue to 9th Street to conform to the times, the plans. Now there's a new boom with major renovations and additions. Strip mines have replaced the deep black holes like number 3. They call themselves after pioneers, places with a mystique. Jim Bridger, Black Butte, lovely names. 9th Street extends up the hill into a trailer court. Row after row of 50-footers and double wides bought by the company flash in waves of aluminum in the sun, hundreds of ripples in the light stream. They're better than tents. The men turn their 4-wheel drives into their rows every night to come home, to eat, to watch TV until dark, except, of course, payday. The women on 9th Street may have to have a meeting, take back their names, give the numbers to the mines, and paint the town doors for another Saturday night. A lot of people who don't know Wyoming think of the state as a big square empty place, you know? Of course they don't know Wyoming, do they, you know? But when I was going to get this book put together, I suggested the name of it as Flyover Country. And my gentle publisher said, oh, okay, and then he looked it up and there's about 20 other books called Flyover Country. So I named it something nobody else had, called putting a name on it. But this is called Flyover Country. On the flight between LA and Chicago, a pilot might point out some feature below, like the Grand Canyon or Devil's Tower. But he won't mention our place on the eastern slope of the Rockies. They call it Flyover Country. High deserts where rains rarely fall. Some might say, what's to look at anyway? Just miles and miles of sagebrush, prairie, small towns nestled in the Badlands. But this plain follows the Oregon Trail, the scar across the land still visible from the air, as thousands of hopefuls walked the west, following wagons or pushing handcarts in search of something else. California, or the fertile valleys of Oregon. Some stopped along the way, claimed this place as their own. I once walked the Continental Divide on a short trek, watched contrails of planes crisscrossing the sky, saw a sago lily blooming alone on the trail. The only sound, the wind whistling tales of long ago, a creaking of immigrant wagons on South Pass, echoing in ruts cut shoulder deep. Some people like to claim the land. They like to say, this much is mine, not yours. Huh? And we have a cabin up by New Fork Lake, north of Pinedale, and I kind of laugh at this whole notion. This is called At the Cabin. Our neighbors build a buck fence around their 3 acres. Boys turn into men, cutting and sawing, stripping bark, nailing the crossbars. It takes a decade to do it on 2-week-a-year vacations. The fence tells us, this much is mine. They tack a sign on it, private property, stay out. Then they are gone. This does not stop deer from bedding down in pine needles, or squirrels from picnicking at their table. Birds chatter across the treetops. A moose steps over the fence. No trespassing flutters like aspen leaves. A marmot freeze frames on the woodpile. A great gray owl silently watches me leaning on their gate. Okay. Well, yeah, thank you very much.
Very much appreciated. Messages from the House.
From the House of Representatives, February 26, 2024. Mr. President, the following bills passed the House on third reading in an amended form. House Bill 166, Education Savings Accounts 1, ayes 44, noes 18. Message number 166, House Joint Resolution number 3, Support for Local Input in Federal Rulemaking, ayes 58, noes 4. Message number 164, House Bill number 104, Omnibus Water Bill Planning, ayes 62. Signed, Katie Talbot, House Chief Clerk.
Thank you, Randy. Introduction of House bills. House Bill 166, first reading of the bill.
House Bill 166 engrossed, Education Savings Account 1, an act relating to education, sponsored by Representative Closton. Passed the House, ayes 44, noes 18.
House Bill 166 is referred to Committee Number 4, Education. House Bill 104, first reading of the House bill.
House Bill 104, Omnibus Water Bill Planning, an act relating to water development projects sponsored by the Water Committee. Passed the House, ayes 62.
House Bill 104 is referred to Committee Number 5, Agriculture. House Joint Resolution 3, first reading of the House Joint Resolution.
House Joint Resolution 3 engrossed, support for local input in federal rulemaking, a joint resolution in support of meaningful state and local government involvement in drafting proposed federal rules, resource management plans, and environmental impact statements, sponsored by Representative Larson. Passed the House, ayes 58, noes 4.
House Joint Resolution 3 is referred to Committee Number 9, Minerals. Senator Dockstader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Privilege of the floor. The Senate, I'd like to introduce you to a group of future student leaders. Star Valley Middle School government class, not the class itself, but those who actually are in leadership positions in the middle school. They have been actually tracking all of these bills that we've been going through. They were listening last week when Senator Ellis was walking us through, 44 pieces of legislation. My granddaughter was among them, saying to my wife at the time, saying, "Oh, we've studied that bill, we've studied that bill." And that's what this group of students have done. They've studied it. Now they got on the bus and made a 7-hour run to Cheyenne. I'd like you to welcome the Star Valley Middle School government leaders. Thank you. Would you stand in the gallery, please? Thank you. Among that class is a young lady that's very special to me, excuse me. My granddaughter, Kaveri Dockstader, she made the trip and she was listening. Please welcome her. Sorry, just a proud grandpa. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. I don't know how you can follow that, but I was wondering if I could refer House Bill 67 to Committee Number 2 Appropriations.
Reports from standing committees.
February 27, 2024. Mr. President, Committee Number 5, Agriculture, State and Public Lands and Water Resources, to whom is referred House Bill 13, Flow-Through Pools Exemption. Respectfully report same back to the Senate with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators French, Ide, Cole, Larson, and Steinmetz. Excuse, Senator Hicks. Senator French, Acting Chairman. February 27, 2024, Mr. President, Committee Number 5, Agriculture, State and Public Lands and Water Resources, to whom is referred House Bill 12, Wyoming Dairy Market Act repeal. Respectfully report same back to the Senate with recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators French, Ide, Cole, Larson, and Steinmetz. Excuse, Senator Hicks. Senator French, Acting Chairman.
Thank you. Reading clerk, budget bill, is that?
Mr. President, your Committee Number 2 Appropriations has reviewed House Bill 1 pursuant to Joint Rule 14-1E. The following lists are provided. Dispensing with further reading, Senator Kinski, Chairman.
In accordance with Joint Rule 14-1, small f, House Bill 1 is referred directly to third reading. Bills on second reading. Let's get that a second. Senator Kinski?
I'm just looking for my agenda, sorry.
We're good. We're going to go right to second reading. We can do the explanation to match the other body.
Oh, you ready now?
We'll go right to second reading, and then if you
Okay.
would like to interrupt before third reading, you can, and if not, we'll do third reading and do it afterwards. Give you a
Okay.
little time. Is that meet
I
with
think
yours?
I'm good.
House Bill 8, second reading of the House Bill.
House Bill 8, Commercial Driver's License Hazardous Material Endorsement.
House Bill 8, having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. House Bill 10, second reading of the House Bill.
House Bill 10, Grace Period State Land Lease Renewals.
House Bill 10, having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. House Bill 11, second reading of the House Bill.
House Bill 11, Engrossed State Land Lease Amendments.
House Bill 11, having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. House Bill 14, second reading of the House Bill.
House Bill 14, Engrossed Prior Authorization Regulations.
House Bill 14, having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. House Bill 16, second reading of the House Bill.
House Bill 16, Sutton State Archaeological Site Legal Description.
House Bill 16, having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. House Bill 21, second reading of the House Bill.
House Bill 21, Engrossed Charter School Leasing.
House Bill 21, having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. House Bill 23, second reading of the House Bill.
House Bill 23, Vehicle Registration, E-Certificate and Grace Period.
House Bill 23, having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. House Bill 26, second reading of the House Bill.
House Bill 26, Emergency Protective Services Effective Period.
House Bill 26, having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. House Bill 27, second reading of the House Bill.
House Bill 27, DFS and Law Enforcement Cross-Reporting.
House Bill 27, having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. House Bill 32, second reading of the House Bill.
House Bill 32, Geological Sequestration Utilization Amendments.
There is an amendment. Could we have the amendment read in, please?
House Bill 32, second reading amendment number 1, page 2, line 1, after.
Senator Beitman.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move second reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 32 and ask for your aye vote. Ladies and gentlemen, yesterday we had a long discussion about this bill, and one of the questions I had was regarding the mineral estate maintaining the dominant estate, and whether or not this would prohibit mineral owners from being able to develop their minerals. And so we were given assurances, yeah, that's not a problem, but I like to get things in writing. So that's what this amendment does. As you can see, it protects the mineral estate from always being the dominant estate, and it also protects the mineral interest owner from having the right to develop their minerals that are located where carbon sequestration is taking place. Stand for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. President. This amendment really does nothing to help or hurt the bill. It doesn't, it puts in writing what's already in statute. So it's fine. I'll stand beside the amendment. There's no issue with it. My only question is, when we're looking for regulatory reduction, do we need to add another layer of language that doesn't do anything? Thank you.
Further questions? Senator Scott.
Mr. President, on and for this amendment, call your attention to three little I on the amendment, that we're not going to prohibit a mineral interest owner from developing owner's minerals located where carbon sequestration is taking place or has occurred. And, Mr. Chairman, I would point out that I think under normal circumstances, the minerals they're in the same particular piece of land that the carbon sequestration is taking place, but they're very likely to be in a very different geologic formation. And that keeps this amendment, I think, is important because it keeps this carbon sequestration from locking up other minerals. So on and for the amendment, Mr. President.
Further questions? Further questions? Seeing, Senator Rothfuss.
Thanks, Mr. President. Neutral on the amendment, I think that it effectively does nothing legally, so it doesn't do any harm. And it can provide a little bit of additional clarity as was suggested. The Romanet 3 is consistent with how law would already be. The pore space estate is a part of the surface estate, and as such, it defers to the mineral estate. So that is clear in statute, but again, I don't think there's anything that's harmful in this particular amendment. It just reiterates what's already in statute.
Thank you. Further discussion? Seeing none. Question being called, we're voting on second reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 32. All in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. Second reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 32 has passed the Senate. Back on the bill. House Bill 32 having been read 2 separate times. The question is, shall the bill be heard a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. House Bill 40, second reading of the House bill.
House Bill 40, School District Trustee Oath of Office.
House Bill 40 having been read 2 separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. House Bill 46, second reading of the House bill.
House Bill 46, Chancery Court Timeline for Resolution of Disputes.
House Bill 46 having been read 2 separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection. House Bill 71, second reading of the House bill.
House Bill 71, Broadband Development Sub-Account Amendments.
House Bill 71 having been read 2 separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. House Bill 72, second reading of the House bill.
House Bill 72, Workers' Compensation Provision for Adverse Deviation.
Senator Drew.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to, a question was asked by the Majority Floor Leader yesterday about this bill, and I did misspeak, and I wanted to make sure I got it corrected for everybody right now. It is not, this bill is not a rebate. It is a rate reduction. That's what's called out in the specific, and that was why the good Majority Floor Leader couldn't find anything about a rebate, because it's not. It's just a rate reduction. So I'll be glad to answer any other questions, but just want to make sure we got that on the record. Thank you.
Further questions? Senator, okay. House Bill 72 having been read 2 separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. House Bill 73, second reading of the House bill.
House Bill 73, Abandoned Mine Reclamation Accounts.
House Bill 73 having been read 2 separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Can't see. What's that? Standing committee reports.
February 27, 2024. Mr. President, your Committee Number 2, Appropriations, to whom is referred House Bill 83 engrossed, Public Retirement Actuarially Determined Contributions, respectfully reports same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Anderson, Guru, and Nethercott. No, Senator Salazar. Excused, Senator Kinski. Senator Kinski, Chairman. February 27, 2024, Mr. President, Committee Number 2, Appropriations, to whom is referred House Bill 138, State Funds, Pool A Participation and Fund Limits, respectfully reports same back to the Senate with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Anderson, Guru, Nethercott. No, Senator Salazar. Excused, Senator Kinski. Senator Kinski, Chairman. February 27, 2024, Mr. President, Committee Number 2, Appropriations, to whom was referred House Bill 33, Mining Operations, Blasting Requirements, respectfully report same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Anderson, Nethercott, and Salazar. Excused, Senators Guru and Kinski. Senator Kinski, Chairman. February 27, 2024, Mr. President, Committee Number 2, Appropriations, to whom was referred House Bill 74, engrossed, Public Health Nursing Budget Requests. Respectfully report same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Anderson, Guru, Nethercott, and Salazar. Excused, Senator Kinski. Senator Kinski, Chairman. February 27, 2024, Mr. President, Committee Number 2, Appropriations, to whom was referred House Bill 34, Solid Waste Municipal Cease and Transfer Funding. Respectfully report same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Anderson, Guru, Nethercott, and Salazar. Excused, Senator Kinski. Senator Kinski, Chairman.
Thank you, Randy. We're going to stand at ease to the sound of the gavel. Standing committee reports.
February 27, 2024. Mr. President, Committee Number 6, Travel, Recreation, Wildlife, and Cultural Resources, to whom is referred House Bill 67, engrossed, Outdoor Recreation and Tourism Trust Fund Administration 2. Respectfully report same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Baldwin, Ellis, Guru, Jones, and Schuler. Senator Schuler, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. President. Now that the bill's been read in, could I possibly refer House Bill 67 to appropriations? Thank you.
Senator Kinski, would you like to lead us through a budget?
Yes, sir, Mr. President. So folks, under our mirror budget rules, just to review the process, after the Senate bill crosses over to the House and the House bill crosses over to the Senate, we take a brief break while staff digests all those differences, gives us a report.
Senator Kinski, I goofed up. We got to go through a little bit more process. This is on me.
Okay?
House Bill 1, third reading of the bill.
House Bill 1, General Government Appropriations 2, sponsored by the Appropriations Committee, an act to make appropriations for the fiscal biennium.
Senator Kinski, do you explain the amendments? I've got us in order now.
Okay, so my job is to just explain the House amendments. As a technical matter, you will see on your desk a page that is front and back, that is just a whole series of amendments. It's titled HB 001 SS 001 Standing Committee Report. And it's a whole list of amendments. Those are all the amendments the House made. And under the rules, all we are doing is reporting them to you. The Appropriations Committee is just reporting. There's no vote on them. After the report is presented and received, and we've had a chance to thoroughly understand the House amendments, subsequently, tomorrow, likely, the president would appoint a joint conference committee that would then begin to meet and try to resolve those differences. That joint conference committee's job is to bring back a report to both bodies that, in theory, both bodies would approve, and if not, we would go to a free committee. So this one page is really indecipherable. What you really need is the great big spreadsheet, which actually explains amendment by amendment by amendment what's on that one page. And we will do that in just a few minutes after we get a high-level summary from Senator Anderson. This is your chance to thoroughly vet these amendments. I will say that because they're House amendments, Senator Salazar and I will do our best to walk you through them, but hit us with the questions. If we can't answer them, we'll scurry back and get the answer we can from staff. And even when we're done today, you can always seek more information from staff as to clarify some of these House amendments. With that, you have on your desk a very large sheet of paper. I appreciate how big this stuff is because it gets harder to read every year. It's titled High-Level Summary of Difference Between HB1 and SF1 Revised. Mine says 226. And Senator Anderson will walk us through this high-level summary of the differences between the House and the Senate. Senator Anderson.
Senator Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. President. You've got this paper on your desk, this big paper that has all the review of it, that is. It isn't all the detail. In the top header there, you see that the House appropriated $362,455,840 more than we did. The Senate cut $767,221,772. So that's that 1.1 billion difference that they talk about, that you've heard about so far. That's the difference that committee will have to be working on to settle. The details are down below the large fiscal impacts amendments, and you can see the Veterans Home Construction, the House appropriated for that. The state capital construction, they appropriated for that. Keep right on going down. We did not appropriate anything for those, and you keep right on going down, and then you get down to where we cut the 200 million out for large energy projects, and they cut nothing. So all those Senate cuts are listed there. Then down below, there's no House action, and the differences are change of accounts. Now, the Senate did all of these, eliminated the large school capital construction holding account, moved that into another account, moved all that money into various other areas. The House did nothing with that. So that's another thing that they're going to have to be conferring on. So that's kind of the high level. And of course, the details are in the smaller print here that Senator Kinski said they were going to present. Thank you, Mr. President.
Do we have further, Senator Kinski, or is that? Oh, I'm very sorry. Senator Salazar.
Thank you, Mr. President. So members of the body, if you look on page 1, we'll start the quick briefing here. Starting with page 1, these are identical mirror amendments. So I'll start on the first line. It's House second reading amendment number 5 and Senate third reading amendment number 1. Is the Office of the Governor. It increases by $20,000 from the general fund and adds footnote 8 for a feasibility study to assess expansion of the Lifesaver program and to assess requirements for dementia training for law enforcement. Below that, House third reading amendment 74 and Senate third reading amendment number 2, Office of the Governor, adds footnote 8 to specify $850,000 appropriated for the Federal Natural Resource Policy account to the Office of the Governor for purposes of funding cost of 2 full-time positions within a statewide association representing counties to enhance county interdisciplinary capabilities and to protect state and local natural resource interests. House second reading amendment number 8 and Senate second reading amendment number 10, Department of Agriculture, specifies within footnote 2 that $300,000 from the general fund will go to the Natural Resource Division of Wyoming Agriculture in the classroom and shall be included in the Department of Agriculture's standard budget for the immediately succeeding fiscal biennium. House second reading amendment number 18 and Senate third reading amendment number 7, Department of Health, increases by $250,000 from the general fund and includes footnote 15 to specify the additional funds are for purposes of trauma designations and education. House Second Amendment 57 and Senate Second Amendment 30, dealing with the Department of the Wyoming Tourism Board, decreases by $700,000 and deletes footnote 1, authorizing the appropriation to be used for the entry and participation fees, travel, advertising, and builder costs for the Wyoming branded float for the 2025-2026 Rose Parade. House Second Reading 26 and Senate Second Reading Amendment 38 deals with the University of Wyoming, increases by $2.5 million to the general fund and adds footnote 12, specifying these funds are appropriated for the purpose of providing state matching funds solely to support excellence in research, education, and extension in ranch and rangeland management. House Second Reading Amendment 32 and Senate Second Reading Amendment 45, again, are identical, adds footnote 1 requiring the Office of Administrative Hearings to provide services to community colleges. House Third Reading Amendment 29 and Senate Second Reading 46, Wyoming Gaming Commission, amends footnote 1 to specify the study required under this footnote, identifying gaps in Wyoming's law that affects or may affect the security, integrity, and fairness of gaming activities. House Second Reading Amendment 38 and Senate Third Reading Amendment 34, dealing with school capital construction, increases by 1.8 for charter school leases in Laramie County School District 1 and Natroni County School District 1 for school years 24-25 and 25-26. House Second Reading Amendment 39 and Senate Second Reading Amendment 52 deals with revisions to prior appropriation, amends Section 318 to modify 2022 Wyoming session laws. Chapter 51 is amended by 2023 Wyoming session laws. Chapter 94. This decreases by 24 million from the general fund distribution to the State Water Pollution Control revolving loan account by 17 million to the general fund to 7.2 million, and distribute 17.3 million from the general fund to the state drinking water revolving loan account. House second reading amendment 42 and Senate second reading amendment 56, dealing with the Wyoming Spanish-American War Monument, increases by $75,000 from the general fund and adds a new section to provide an appropriation to the Department of State Parks and Cultural Resources for the repair and installation of the Wyoming Spanish-American War Monument. House second reading 47 and Senate second reading 57, dealing with the state military department lands, authorizes the governor to reimburse the costs of suppressing fires burning on or that are burned on or that organization on any state land managed by the Wyoming Military Department from the Fire Protection Revolving Account. And finally, House third reading amendment 73 and Senate third reading amendment 52. This is dealing with the state shooting complex, adds section 330 to specify that subject to management council approval, up to $50,000 may be expended by the State Shooting Complex Oversight Task Force. We go on now to related amendments. These are same subject matters between the two chambers. House third reading amendment 89, Senate third reading amendment 67 are all technical corrections. The references are in the description. Again, these are simply technical corrections. House second reading amendment 49, it was deleted. This was dealing with $2 million from the general fund regarding border security in the state of Texas. The House, if you look on to the next one, House third reading amendment number 2, Senate second reading amendment number 1, shifted that dollar amount and increased it by $1 million from the general fund and adds footnote 8. This simply authorizes the office of the governor to reimburse Wyoming law enforcement agencies for expenses associated with lawful volunteer agreements to assist border state law enforcement efforts. And with that, Mr. President, I will pass it on to the Chairman of Appropriations.
Chairman Kinski.
Thank you, Mr. President. Folks, let's stay on page 1 for just a bit to just review. And I want to reinforce this. On page 1, the first set of amendments, upper left-hand corner in green, you'll see those labeled as identical. So under our rules, we go to a conference committee, those cannot be changed. If that conference committee fails and you go to a free committee, those are all up for grabs. Next down, about 3/4 of the way of the page down, in a green box, you'll see the word related. And these are similar, maybe a little bit difference in language. I'll give you, for instance, the last two deal with border security, and the House and the Senate both took similar actions, a little bit different on the money, a little bit different on the language. So presumably, the relateds would be able to be worked out fairly readily. So with that, on page 2, let's continue with the relateds. The first is House third reading amendment number 4. And on the House side, you had Nicholas. On the Senate side, you had Larson. And what happened here is this is about the, originally we started with a footnote that the state, Secretary of State was not to engage in litigation outside the state or that he was not named in. The Senate removed it and the House kept it and extended the prohibition to all of the other top offices except the governor. Next down is House second reading amendment 7, House sponsor O'Hearn, Senate Nethercott. This deals with the $15 million exchange, the military land for the, by Camp Guernsey. And there's just, the difference is that they are taking it out of different accounts for the deposit. I mean, it deposits to different accounts, so that one presumably would be readily resolved. Next is House Second 15, Crago and Hicks. This is the Wildlife Natural Resources Trust. The $5 million additional. The House struck the requirement that there be a 3-to-1 match. Otherwise, they're basically on the same page. Next is House 2053, Penn and Hutchings. And I've got a note that this is related to the next one after that, House Third Reading 10, Crago. So Penn and Hutchings adds a footnote, no funds appropriated into this section shall be expended for any gender transition, gender reassignment, or for abortion. Subsequently, House Third Reading 10 by Crago adds an exception for incest, rape, threats to life of the mother. Now I'm going up one to House Third Reading 12, Byron on the House, Scott in the Senate, Department of Health. Increases by $4 million for services to preschool children with disabilities, and amends the footnote number 12 to reference increased funding. Let me see, I've got another cross-reference here, further amended by 89. I'm not quite sure what the difference was between those two footnotes. I may have to circle back on that one. I'll get with staff. House Second 2022, Davis here and Hicks there, and Driscoll on the Livestock Board. This increases by $75,000 for acquiring the jack stock donkeys. Defeated in the Senate on third reading, but the House kept. Okay, House Third Reading 18, Zwanitzer there, Nethercott here, University of Wyoming, $250,000. Appropriated for UW Family Medical Residency Practice for adjunct faculty, counselors, and others for prenatal care for pregnant mothers, veterans, mental health, medication management, suicide prevention. The House added the prenatal care for pregnant mothers. And I'm not certain whether that $250,000 is new or whether it's out of, no, that is new money, all right? Next, House Second 41, Nicholas there, Hicks here. Benchmark Performance and Compensation Review. I've got a note that the Senate deleted this and the House kept it and required Management Council in consultation with the Governor's Office approve the external consultant. And then there's, okay, House Third 76, Nicholas there, Hicks here. This is the Kelly parcel. Looks like the amendment is identical, but modified over here by House Third 86, Hicks. Specifies conditions of sale shall require Kelly parcel be leased for livestock grazing available for public hunting into perpetuity. That brings us down to House Third 55, Larson there, Nethercott here, ARPA. This is the fallback in case the ARPA bill fails. It gives basically the entire authority to the governor to get the money spent. Now we are on unrelated. House Third Reading 1, Nimick there, Homeland Security, $5.5 million for hazmat equipment and teams. Next, House Third Reading 5, Harshman, this is a state treasurer. This directs the state treasurer, authorizes the state treasurer to invest $15 million per year from the PMTF, the Permanent Mineral Trust Reserve Account, to bonds issued by the Wyoming Community Development Authority to finance loans to first-time home buyers at a mortgage rate not to exceed 3.5%. This is subsequently amended by the next amendment, House Third 75, Nicholas, who changes it from the Permanent Mineral Trust Fund to the Legislative Stabilization Reserve for investment in mortgages. So basically, as the WCDA issues these mortgages, the state is going to buy them and hold them in its portfolio. This is a $30 million per biennium amendment. House 6, Byron, Attorney General, Law Office, $100,000 to pay a third-party contractor to investigate mailers that fail to comply with Wyoming statutory requirements regarding campaign advertising. Next is House Second 50 by Washut, Attorney General. Adds $285,000 and 1 full-time employee to be used to investigate cold cases. $75,000 of the appropriation is for contract investigative services. House 81, Conrad, Behavioral Health. Later, you'll see where one of our representatives is building up a fund to do complete demolition of the old hospital. Now, here we have an amendment by somebody that says, don't demolish them. I want 2 years to study how they might be used for economic development. And that's there's no money, it just says, hold on. House Second 78 by Western. He increases $1 million in general fund, it goes to the Wyoming Home Services Program, that's the senior services. And then followed by House 20, Rodriguez-Williams, Department of Health, Aging, an additional $314,000 for Wyoming senior centers. And then next we have House 21, Provenza, adding $850,000 to increase compensation for foster care providers. And with that, we go on to page 3, Senator Salazar.
Senator Salazar.
Thank you, Mr. President. So we continue on page 3, unrelated. House Second Reading 54. This is dealing with the Department of Family Services. This is an increase of $2.42 million from the general fund. And this specifies that the appropriation is to increase the room and board reimbursement rate paid by the Department of Family Services to group homes, residential treatment centers, and Board of Cooperative Education Service facilities. Continuing on to House Third Reading Amendment 13, dealing with, again, the Department of Family Services. This is an increase of $1.15 million from the general fund and $4.75 and adds footnote 7 that specifies that the Department of Family Services is directed to apply for and, if approved, administer the Summer Electronic Benefit Transfer within the Child Nutrition Program. Going on to Wyoming Tourism Board, House Second Reading Amendment 24. This increases by $500,000 and adds footnote 3 that appropriates that amount to the Wyoming Tourism Reserve and Projects account and directs the Wyoming Tourism Board to distribute this appropriation in the event any public Wyoming airport is selected as a site of the National Championship Air Races to the public entity operating the selected airport. Continuing on to House Third Reading Amendment 15, again, Wyoming Tourism Board. This increases appropriation of $150,000 from the Wyoming Tourism Reserve and Projects account for a comprehensive feasibility study for the establishment of a Veterans Museum in Casper. House Second Reading Amendment 25, moving on to the University of Wyoming. This adds footnote 12 that specifies a portion of this appropriation by the University of Wyoming to review opportunities for acquiring property in neighboring states in or near regional medical teaching centers and requires a report to 3 legislative committees. House Second Reading Amendment 63 is deleted. Moving on, House Third Reading Amendment 56, University of Wyoming State Aid. This was adding, or does add, footnote 12 that specifies a portion of the appropriation shall be expended by UW to review opportunities, feasibility, and costs associated with expanding medical education and training for Wyoming students, including broader use of Wiki, expanded agreements with WWAMI, and new relationships with public universities in the western region of the United States. To continue on, again, we're dealing with Wiki. This increases by $1.3 million to the general fund and amends footnote 1 to increase the appropriation to a total of $2 million for student contracts. House second reading amendment 27 for the Wyoming Business Council. This adds footnote 6 that specifies the $250,000 out of the general fund, which is effective immediately to complete a feasibility study regarding the creation or expansion of generic drug manufacturing or production of Wyoming with the intent of lowering prescription drug costs for Wyoming residents. House second reading amendment 28, again with dealing with the Wyoming Business Council. This adds footnote 6 that specifies $8 million from the general fund is appropriated for grants for infrastructure improvements for housing to attract, retain, and expand Wyoming's workforce to create additional economic health and a strong state economy. House third reading amendment 21, again dealing with the Wyoming Business Council. This amends footnote 5 to delete the requirement that the authorization for the expenditure of federal funds associated with the state small business credit initiative to be included in the Wyoming Business Council's next budget request. House third reading amendment 26, dealing with the Department of Education, adds footnote 7 to specify a portion of the general fund appropriation to be expended to conduct a state survey on the status of school district programs on suicide prevention. House third reading amendment 57 adds footnote 7 to specify that as a condition of the appropriation, that the Department of Education shall assist the Joint Education Interim Committee in the study of early childhood education and the establishment of a half-day pre-kindergarten program available to all children statewide. House third reading amendment 27 amends footnote 1 to specify that any expenditures by the Department of Education pursuant to this footnote be documented and included in the Department of Education's standard budget for the immediately succeeding fiscal biennium. House second reading amendment 12, dealing with the Wyoming Game Commission, increases $350,000 and adds a footnote specifying that $350,000 is a 1 FTE in fiscal 25 only for a director and executive secretary for the commission. House second reading amendment 13 increases $354,000 and adds a footnote that 5 AWACS are for race day staffing and operations at parimutuel events. And finally, House third reading amendment 28, dealing with, again, Wyoming Gaming Commission, amends 2013-1 and makes race day staffing effective immediately. And with that, I will go to the Chairman of Appropriations.
Let me just circle back to just a couple of notes on page 3. If you go up 1, 2, 3, 4 from the bottom, House third 27's Wanitzer. This is, I hate to use a proper name, but FFA. It's described generically in the budget as agriculture education. And it's been, I don't know for how long we have to just keep renewing that in the budget from biennium to biennium. And this just says, just put it in the standard budget. So that's one that's kind of hard to understand what it is without knowing. Then you go up to 28 on the housing. You will recall that as our bill left, there was a section 334 that had 5 million for housing. This adds 8 million. That's 13 million for housing. And those are the two that I just want to give you a little bit more background on that. Okay, page 4. House, third reading 30, Nicholas. Okay, we get into a whole series of amendments that add the capital construction bill back in. HB 135 failed of introduction on the House side. It did not get introduced here, and so it's going into the budget here. So the first line, you'll see that's 55 million in federal funds and 36 million in other funds. That creates the base budget for the CapCon. Next is, next line down, $7 million appropriates CapCon for the Department of State Parks and Cultural Resources. I don't know exactly what those projects are. I'll see if we have a list from staff. Next is the State Hospital demolition account authorization. Next is a Riverton State Office building renovation authorization. Next is grabbing into $10 million from the Jackson Outreach Center capital construction. It's not yet done, but they're anxious to revert those funds. Next is $37 million for Stolt Hall at the girls' school demolition. After that is, and now we get into Gillette College. This is $33 million. You see it says PR, that's private revenue. So this is money that's being raised in Campbell County, as I understand it, for the NZ building, and this authorized the transfer of the building to the Community College District. Next is Section 300, and what this does, it describes a series of buildings that the city of Gillette built for Gillette College and held, and it authorizes them to be transferred to the college, and it places those buildings on major maintenance by the state. Next is Gillette College Property Transfer 2. And this is transferring buildings that were built by the county for Gillette College, authorizes the college to accept title to those, and then it places all major maintenance on those buildings on the state's community college budget. Two things not in here are any work on the Law Enforcement Academy. And that's mostly it, is they did not include the Law Enforcement Academy, any of that work. I did not see the Helitac, was not in there. The Helitac is in there? Well, I'm getting a different word from staff, so give me a second here. I went to talk to him and he ran away. He'll be back. Okay, let's continue, but we'll find, we need to circle back and get a little bit more detail on what's in that state parks cultural rep and then what they did with Helitac. Okay, now we get into House 33A, Nicholas, budget balancers and transfers. Here he's taking what they didn't spend on CapCon and he's transferring it to SIPA. And then he has to make a $100 million transfer to the Permanent Mineral Trust Fund, not effective immediately. And it's because there's enough spending there that they've got to be able to make sure there's enough cash on hand to fulfill their needs. Next below that, budget balancers transfers 2. Again, now what we're doing here is we add a new section 300 to make the end of the biennium transfer from the budget reserve to the LISRA to be anything over $300 million. And this is, they're trying to get enough money into some of these accounts to make up for the spending. And next is budget balance transfers 3. This is the statutory reserve of 5%. Specifies the state auditor shall transfer from the LISRA to bring the unobligated balance of the BRA on June 30 up to 5%. Okay, next is House 33 Western budget balances transfers, $40 million to the 988 trust fund. House 34, Larson. Okay, this is the first $25 million of reversions from this year's budget are to go to an account for match for the IIJA-BEAD program. What is that? That's the administration's Inflation Infrastructure Jobs Act, trillions of dollars. And underneath that is a program called Broadband Equity Access Deployment. And it requires a 25% match. There's $300 million of federal funds. And so this is a transfer to try and accumulate match money for those projects. So the applicants are the cable companies, the broadband companies, but this is, as I understand it, some of them can't afford the match, and this is going to make the match for them. House 3rd, 36, Larson, increases by another $13 million to appropriate funds for demolition of abandoned facilities on the campus of the Wyoming State Hospital. There was an appropriation last year of $15 million, so this gets us to $28 million. And then, of course, there's a footnote earlier that says, hold on for 2 years, don't do anything. Somebody wants to study it locally for a project for economic development. House 3rd, 45, Larson, revisions to prior appropriations. Let me take a minute here. Oh, yeah. So this is a provision that's been in here. This is the third budget it's been brought back. There was a provision a long time ago that said, here's money, I think it was $5 million, to revive rehabilitate a former school in a town that previously received funding for that school, which uniquely described one project in one community. It's been subsequently amended in last year's budget and in this year's budget to become so generic that just about everybody would be eligible. So now it's just, they strike former school, and it's just, and strikes the limitation that it's for a project that previously received assistance, and it's just $5 million for a community facility grant program, which the Business Council previously tried to get out of that business. House 2nd, 75, Nicholas, State Budget System Review. Somehow when we talked about reviewing the state's budget management and reporting system, we didn't include the governor as one of the stakeholders that would participate in that. This remedies that error. House 3rd reading 69, Election Administration and Security. This doubles the amount of money granted to clerks for voter education on new voter registration laws. House 2nd reading 46, Northrop, raises all Hathaway scholarships by 5%. Okay, House 3rd reading 47.02, Western. He increases the death benefit for law enforcement from 62% to 90%. The problem being it's only for the period of the budget. I think that's going to get amended into one of the retirement bills, and this won't be necessary. You hate to give a grieving widow that money just to take it away 2 years later. Okay, House 3rd reading 50. In comes a bill that failed on the House. Now it's being amended back into the budget. This is $18.5 million to create a Department of Education grant program for school districts to address mental health needs of students. It's for nurses and guidance counselors. The bill had $36 million. In the budget, it's been pared back to $18 million. And then finally, House 3rd reading 85, Nicholas. There was established last session an outdoor recreation and tourism trust fund account. Earnings, just a fund. There's no sideboards on it. No money's supposed to be spent until there's a bill that puts those sideboards on it, and that bill failed. So this just says, well, notwithstanding that, we want to allow the interest earnings to be spent. So that is page 4. Yes, sir. Okay, going back to the top, House, third reading 30, Nicholas on the cap construction. This is a footnote that says we're going to rebuild the helitack and we're going to move it out of Duncan Ranch, correct, Don? And it's going to be relocated to Casper if that stays that way. And then, let me just find out about one of. And then evidently, there's a list of projects for state parks. Let's go ahead and get this distributed to the floor. Wait, we need to make sure this, I'm looking at a capital construction, the original Capcom bill and how it's been modified. Let's get this cleaned up so that we can clearly tell what's in their bill and get that distributed to the floor. All right, questions?
Questions of the committee? Must have done a good job. Senator Landman.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. If I could go to page 4 to the chairman and down to House Amendment 45, third reading amendment number 45, regarding that former school facility. My question would be, if we do not carry through with what someone had in mind for that school facility, will we inherit it back? And if we do, then we will face through the school facilities functions a demolition of that particular building, which can run quite a little bit of money. So I just wondered if anyone on appropriations can remember exactly what building we're talking about, what that amendment does. Thank you.
Further questions? Senator Steinmetz.
Thank you, Mr. President. And we may not have this answer right now, but I just would like to know, as we're looking at this, how much of these are ongoing expenses and how much are one-time dollars? Thank you, Mr. President.
Further questions? Senator Hutchins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to know, this is Amendment 3032A on page 4, where we talk about transferring buildings to the college. Are these transfers, which sounds like a great idea to us, but now we're going to have to pay for all the maintenance on these buildings? I just want a clarification on that. Thank you, Mr.
Further questions? Further questions? Seeing none. Senator Kinski.
Let me take the first one about the former school facility. I believe that has been transferred to a local authority. It's no longer on the school facilities books. It's a local, either the local town or a local nonprofit has that, and they're trying to get that rehabilitated. That project's been kind of stumbling around for a while. The question about ongoing versus one time is a good one, and I don't know that I have that number readily at hand, but if I don't get it soon, I will get it to you. And then the question about the transfer of the buildings, the transfer of the buildings, pretty much, it's a good idea to have it take place. I guess it's your call on whether or not it goes on the state for purposes of major maintenance. That was a debate that we had here on the floor, a passionate debate, and I guess I'd leave it to the floor as to what they want to do about that. The transfer is not objectionable, but the footnote does say, specifically says they'll go on the state budget for major maintenance, and I'm not going to get into that one. I've got a dog in the fight, and it's hard for me to be objective, so I'll just stay out of that one.
Thank you, Mr. President. To answer the question about the expenses, generally speaking, pages 1, 2, and 3 are ongoing. Page 4 is one-time money, so.
Senator Scott.
Mr. President, following up on that particular issue, is there some problem in some of these I've seen in the past where they'll describe things as one time and we keep getting them back and back and back and they really were ongoing. So I would caution on that is a possibility and we have to look out for that. I don't know whether it's going on in this budget or not.
Further questions? Further questions? Senator Kinski.
We won't be able to have it immediately, but we will get to you a summation of the ongoing expenses on pages 1 through 3 and the one-times in the budget. So get the grand total of both. We'll get that for you.
Chairman Kinski.
If there are no more questions on those standing committee amendments, I'll proceed to what is always the highlight of the day, the goldenrod talk. Okay, so everybody's got a goldenrod. This one is dated February 25th, 2024. It'll highlight the impacts of 3 different types of actions for this biennium and the upcoming 25-26. It'll highlight the impacts of actions in the budget bill, appropriations in standalone bills, impacts on revenues and expenditures in standalone bills, including property tax revenue reductions and savings. As a consequence of all of those, there are lower balances in the operating accounts, general fund, budget reserve, SIPA, and school foundation program, and higher balances in the reserve accounts, the common school permanent land fund account, permanent mineral trust fund reserve account, and in the Senate position, the LISRA. The actions of appropriations in the budget bills between the 2 bodies is evidence on page 3. Flip over to page 3. Line 51. It's called total balance available, this is the forecast of the LISRA balance as of 6/30/26. The Senate approaching 1.6 billion and the House at about 1 billion, a $550 million difference between the 2 bodies. Then at the very bottom of page 3, you'll see the elimination of the SIPA for the 25-26 biennium. That's line 85 all the way down to the bottom, where we have zero, the Senate position has been zero out the SIPA. Then still on page 3, columns R and T, row 20. This is the budget reserve account, which generally should be at 5% of the anticipated general fund expenditures, which would be $155 million, and you'll see neither the House nor the Senate are anywhere near the required $155 million. That reflects a scenario where every bill that impacts the budget and property tax passes. Let's go to page 4. School foundation program. It's several $100 million lower than the beginning balance of nearly $700 million. So on line 7, you'll see the beginning balance is 675 and 693. On the Senate side, we end up with, this type is so small to read. Line 59, correct. We end up with 274 million on the Senate, 100 million on the House. Largely, this is due to property tax bills, the ECA, and a transfer on line 12 of $200 million to the Common School Permanent Land Fund Reserve account. On the House side, column R, It's impacted by the same actions as the Senate, plus a designation of $200 million for large school CapCon, that's line 24, and $110 million in K-12 construction, which is line 31. Okay, and in fact, the other chamber's position requires a $22 million backfill into the school foundation program from the LSRA, and you'll see that on row 22. Okay, let's go to page 5. This is the PMTF reserve account, the Common School Public Land Fund reserve account. And both chambers reflect higher reserve account balances. If you take the aggregate of the reserve accounts, the Senate ends up being $150 million higher on reserves. And then the other difference is on page 6, and that's in the water accounts. And that's rows 12 and 21, where the Senate decreased the appropriations from water account for administration of the state engineer's office and put that back on the general fund. So that's kind of a high-level overview, and I think there's some other folks here that have some elements of the goldenrod they'd like to discuss as well, Mr. President.
Further questions, Senator Hicks?
Yeah, Mr. President, I just bring your attention to page 1. And consistent with the actions that this body took last year to try to, we established those reserve accounts. You'll see that down at the bottom of there where it says permanent Wyoming Mineral Trust Fund Spending Policy Reserve Account and the Common School Permanent Land Fund Spending Policy Reserve Account. We set those up last year for the idea that we buffer the corpuses to generate a higher rate of return. So those are new accounts that were set up. We funded those last year and this year with excess revenues to get up to 5X. And what you see the difference between the House and the Senate is here. If you go back to that language with the direct appropriations we made last year and this year, we got to 5X. The target is 7X. The more we can get in the reserve accounts, the longer horizon the state treasurer's office has to invest those with potentially a higher rate of return. And so you just see the differences between the House and the Senate there. So on the Permanent Mineral Trust Fund Spending Policy Reserve Account, 702 million House version and 804, we're moving to that 7X. Some of the actions this body took. Same with the school permanent land fund reserve account. The House position was 539. We're a little more than that at 764. Mr. President, that's just consistent with the actions that we took last year in the policy position, is to try to move those towards 7X. So I hope that just provides a little edification as to what we did last year, how we're trying to continue to do that, and then how that looks between the two bodies. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator Hicks. Any further comments? Okay. In accordance with Joint Rule 14-1F, third reading will be continued to the next legislative day. There being no further discussion on House Bill 1, in accordance with Joint Rule 14-1G and Joint Rule 14-1H, House Bill 1 is referenced directly to a conference committee of 5 members from each house to meet to resolve the differences between the houses with respect to Budget Bill Senate File 1 and House Bill 1. That committee will be appointed later, so we'll take a break, but that gets us through the reading of the deal. We'll go to bills on third reading. Senator Drew.
Thank you, Mr. President. Can I have privilege of the floor? Just a minute. Thank you. Good members, up in the gallery today up here, we have some folks I'd like to have you give a welcome to. These are men and women who are rail workers, coal miners, trona miners, plumbers, electricians, the folks who ring up your groceries, the folks that help do many factors for all around the state. They're our representative of our 15,000 union members, and we'd like to have you give them a warm Senate welcome. Here.
Mr. Majority Floor Leader. We'll stand at ease to the sound of the gavel, please. Mr. Majority Floor Leader, do you have a consent list? We can gather while you're reading.
We can if we don't have a quorum.
I think we're there.
We're good? All
We're
right.
there, sir.
Yes, Mr. President, we do have a consent list. The consent list is as follows. Senate File 19, Developmental Preschool Funding. Senate File 23, Public Utilities, Energy Resource Procurement. Senate File 24, Public Service Commission, Integrated Resource Plans. Senate File 25, Reclamation and Decommissioning Costs. Senate File 41, Banking Division, Classifications and Salary Exemptions. Senate File 42, Low Carbon Reliable Energy Standards Amendments. Senate File 51, Unlawful Dissemination of Misleading Synthetic Media. Senate File 52, Wyoming Stable Token Act Amendments. Senate File 53, 6th Judicial District, Number of Judges. Senate File 57, Wyoming Adult Hearing Aid Program. Senate File 64, Mineral Royalties Proportional Severance Tax Refunds. Senate File 69, Hospice Care Reimbursements. Senate File 72, Utility Donations. Senate File 73, Concealed Firearms Permit Eligibility. Senate File 74, Special District Reversal of Dissolution of Noncompliance. Senate File 75, Omnibus Water Bill Construction. Senate File 77, Homeland Defense Infrastructure Reporting and Investigating. Senate File 80, Solid Waste Management Definition Amendments. Senate File 82, Summer Vacation Preservation Act. Senate File 83, Revisers Bill. Senate File 86, School Safety and Security Funding. Senate File 89, Veteran Ad Valorem Tax Exemptions Amount. Senate File 94, an act regarding compelled speech in state employers. Senate File 96, Trust and Bank Assets and Bankruptcies Clarification. Senate File 97, Prohibition on Distribution of Unsolicited Ballot Forms. Senate File 98, Statutes of Limitations, Medical Procedures on Minors. Senate File 99, Chloe's Law, Children Gender Change Prohibitions. Senate File 102, Foreign Property Ownership, Critical Infrastructure. Senate File 105, Second Amendment Financial Privacy Act. Senate File 107, E-cigarette and vape materials directory. Senate File 109, Prohibited Red Flag Gun Seizures Act. Senate File 111, Mule and white-tailed deer separate hunting seasons. Senate File 120, Driver's License Unauthorized Alien Restrictions. Senate File 123, Minor Name Changes. Senate File 125, Parimutuel Waging Activities Amendments. Senate File 128, Approval of Charter Schools. Senate File 130, the Equality State, Not the Equity State Act. Senate File 131, Regulatory Reduction Task Force 2.
Would anybody like any of the files removed? Senator Case.
Mr. President, I'm very sorry, but what I heard was Senate File 18 with the description for Senate File 20. Could we read those two again? 18 and 20. 118 and 120.
Mr. Majority Floor Leader, could we restate those?
I may be wrong, but that's what I heard.
There is no 118. I see a 120. I see no 118 on the list.
118 is not on the consent list.
It is not on the consent list, sir.
So Senate File 120, Driver's Licenses, Unauthorized Alien Restrictions.
Senator Bouchard.
Yeah, Mr. President, I'd like to pull Senate File 107.
Without objection, so ordered. Senator Case.
Senate File 99, Chloe's Law, Children Gender Change Prohibition.
Without objection, so ordered. Going once, going twice. Having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall these bills pass the Senate? Senate File 19, Developmental Preschool Funding. Senate File 23, Public Utilities Energy Resource Procurement. Senate File 24, Public Service Commission Integrated Resource Plans. Senate File 25, Reclamation and Decommissioning Costs. Senate File 41, Banking Division Classification and Salary Exemptions. Senate File 42, Low Carbon Reliable Energy Standards Amendments. Senate File 51, Unlawful Dissemination of Misleading Synthetic Media. Senate File 52, Wyoming Stable Token Act Amendments. Senate File 53, Sixth Judicial District Number of Judges. Senate File 57, Wyoming Adult Hearing Aid Program. Senate File 64, Mineral Royalties, Proportional Severance Tax Refunds. Senate File 69, Hospice Care Reimbursements. Senate File 72, Utility Donations. Senate File 73, Concealed Firearms Permit Eligibility. Senate File 74, Special Districts Reversal of Dissolution for Noncompliance. Senate File 75, Omnibus Water Bill, Construction. Senate File 77, Homeland Defense Infrastructure Reporting and Investigating. Senate File 80, Solid Waste Management Definition Amendments. Senate File 82, Summer Vacation Preservation Act. Senate File 83, Revisers Bill. Senate File 86, School Safety and Security Funding. Senate File 89, Veterans Ad Valorem Exemption Amount. Senate File 94, an act regarding compelled speech and state employers. Senate File 96, Trusts and Bank Assets and Bankruptcy Clarification. Senate File 97, Prohibition on Distribution of Unsolicited Ballot Forms. Senate File 98, Statutes of Limitations, Medical Procedures on Minors. Senate File 102, Foreign Property Ownership, Critical Infrastructure. Senate File 105, Wyoming Second Amendment Financial Privacy Act. Senate File 109, Prohibit Red Flag Gun Seizure Act. Senate File 111, Mule and Whitetail Deer, Separate Hunting Seasons. Senate File 120, Driver's Licenses, Unauthorized Alien Restrictions. Senate File 123, Minor Name Changes. Senate File 125, Parimutuel Wagering Activities Amendments. Senate File 128, Approval of Charter School. Senate File 130, the Equality State, Not Equity State Act. Senate File 131, Regulatory Reduction Task Force 2. The Chief Clerk will call the roll.
On the consent list, Anderson. Baldwin. Barlow. Beitman. Boner. Bouchard. Brennan. Case. Cooper. Dockstetter. Ellis. French. Furphy. Guru. Hicks. Hutchings. Aye. Aye. Jones. Kinski. Kolb. Landon. Larson. McEwen. Nethercott. Pappas. Rothfuss. Salazar. Schuler. Scott. Steinmetz. President Driscoll. On the consent list, 31 aye. Senate File 19, are there any changes? Aye to no. Bouchard, aye to no. McEwen? Aye to no. Closing vote. Closing vote closed. Senate File 19, 28 aye, 3 no. Senate File 23, are there any changes? Brennan? Conflict? Closing vote. Closing vote closed. Senate File 23, 30 aye, 1 conflict. Senate File 24, are there any changes? Brandon? Conflict? Closing vote. Closing vote closed. Senate File 24, 30 aye, 1 conflict. Senate File 25, are there any changes? Closing vote, oh, Brennan? Brennan, conflict. Closing vote. Closing vote closed. Senate File 25, 30 aye, 1 conflict. Senate File 41, are there any changes? McEwen? McEwen, aye to no. Hutchings? Aye to no. Aye. Aye to no. French? Aye to no. Salazar? No. Larson? No. Kolb? No. Bouchard? No. Closing vote. Closing vote closed. Senate File 41, 23 aye, 8 no. Senate File 42, are there any changes? Bouchard? Aye to no. Hutchings? Aye to no. McEwen? Aye to no. Steinmetz? Aye to no. Ide? Aye to no. French? Aye to no. Larson? Aye to no. Salazar? Aye to no. Brennan? Brennan, aye to conflict. Beitman? Aye to no. Case? Aye to no. Closing vote. Closing vote closed. Senate File 42, 20 aye, 10 no, 1 conflict. Senate File 51, are there any changes? Beitman? Aye to no. Larson? Aye to no. Ellis? Aye to no. Brennan? Aye to no. Kinski? Aye to no. Schuler? Aye to no. Barlow? No. McEwen? No. Hutchings? No. Jones? No. Kolb? Aye to no. Ide? No. French? No. Scott? No. Salazar? No. Steinmetz? No. Boner? Aye to no. Bouchard? Aye to no. Dockstetter? Aye to no. Landon? Aye to no. Closing vote? Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 51, 11 aye, 20 no. Senate File 52, are there any changes? Spiteman? No. Ide? No. Kewen? No. Kolb? No. Hutchings? Aye to no. French? Aye to no. Steinmetz? Aye to no. Salazar? No. Larson? No. Kinski? No. Bouchard? No. Closing vote? Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 52, 20 aye, 11 no. Senate File 53, are there any changes? Ide? No. Closing vote? Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 53, 30 aye, 1 no. Senate File 57, are there any changes? Larson? No. Ide? No. Bouchard? No. McEwen? No. Hutchings? No. French? No. Hicks? No. Steinmetz? No. Case? No. Kinski? No. Beitman? No. Kolb? No. Closing vote? Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 57, 19 aye, 12 no. Senate File 64, are there any changes? Hicks? Hicks, no. Rothfuss, no. Steinmetz, no. Case, no. French, no. Barlow, no. Nethercott, no. Hutchings, no. Guru, no. Driscoll, no. Landon, no. Pappas, no. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 64, 19 aye, 12 no. Senate File 69, are there any changes? Ide? No. Bouchard, no. McEwen? No. Hutchings? No. French? No. Larson? No. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 69, 25 aye, 6 no. Senate File 72, are there any changes? Brennan? Brennan, aye to conflict. Salazar? No. Closing vote. Closing. Kolb, aye to no. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 72, 28 aye, 2 no, 1 conflict. Senate File 73, are there any changes? Closing vote. Closing vote closed. Senate File 73, 31 aye. Senate File 74, are there any changes? Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 74, 31 aye. Senate File 75, are there any changes? Ellis, aye to no. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 75, 30 aye, 1 no. Senate File 77, are there any changes? Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 77, 31 aye. Senate File 80, are there any changes? Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 80, 31 aye. Senate File 82, are there any changes? Scott? No. Schuler? Aye to no. Barlow? Aye to no. Case? Aye to no. Hicks? Aye to no. Closing. Anderson? Aye to no. Hutchings? Aye. Cooper? Aye to no. Larson? Aye to no. Mr. President, I'm going to repeat the noes. On Senate File 82, Anderson, Barlow, Case, Cooper, Hicks, Larson, Schuler, and Scott. Did I miss any changes? Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 82, 23 aye, 8 no. Senate File 83, are there any changes? Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 83, 31 aye. Senate File 86, are there any changes? Rothfuss? Aye to no. Bouchard? Aye to no. Case? Aye to no. Barlow? Aye to no. McEwen? Aye to no. Ellis? Aye to no. Furphy? Aye to no. Cooper? Aye to no. Schuler? Aye to no. Baldwin? No. Pappas? No. Landon? No. Garou? No. Driscoll? No. Anderson? No. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 86, 16 aye, 15 no. Senate File 89, are there any changes? Hutchings conflict, Schuler conflict, Rothfuss, aye to no. Salazar, conflict, Case, aye to no. McEwen conflict, correct? Hutchings conflict. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 89, 25 aye, 2 no, 4 conflict. Senate File 84, are there any Senate File 94, are there any changes? Ellis? No. Rothfuss? No. Case? No. Nethercott? No. Landon? No. Cooper? No. Furphy? No. Driscoll? No. Pappas? No. Garou? No. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 94, 21 aye, 10 no. Senate File 96, are there any changes? Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 96, 31 aye. Senate File 97, are there any changes? Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 97, 31 aye. Senate File 98, are there any changes? Rothfuss, aye to no. Case? Aye to no. Landon, no. Guru, no. Anderson, no. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 98, 26 aye, 5 no. Senate File 102, are there any changes? Case, aye to no. Rothfuss? Aye to no. Driscoll, aye to no. Landon, no. Baldwin, no. Guru, no. Cooper, no. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 102, 24 aye, 7 no. Senate File 105, are there any changes? Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 105, 31 aye. Senate File 109, are there any changes? Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 109, 31 aye. Senate File 111, are there any changes? Beitman, no. Closing vote. Aye. Aye to no. French? Aye to no. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 111, 28 aye, 3 no. Senate File 120, are there any changes? Rothfuss, aye to no. Anderson, aye to no. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 120, 29 aye, 2 no. Senate File 123, are there any changes? Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 123. Dockstetter conflict? Is that correct, Senator Dockstetter? No? Senate File 123, 31I. Senate File 125. Are there any changes? Hutchings, aye to no. Steinmetz, aye to no. French, aye to no. Ide, aye to no. McEwen, aye to no. Closing Ellis, aye to no. Boner, aye to no. Scott? No. Larson? No. Bouchard? No. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 125, 21 aye, 10 no. Senate File 128, are there any changes? Rothfuss, aye to no. Case, aye to no. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 128, 29 aye, 2 no. Senate File 130, are there any changes? Guru? Aye to no. Rothfuss? Aye to no. Anderson? Aye to no. Pappas? No. Case? No. Baldwin? No. Cooper? No. Ellis? No. Furphy? No. Landon? No. Nethercott? No.
Driscoll, no.
Driscoll? No. Schuler? No. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 130, 18 aye, 13 no. And finally, Senate File 131, are there any changes? Case? Aye to no. Barlow? Aye to no. Bouchard? Aye to no. Ide? Aye to no. Scott? No. Larson? No. French? No. McEwen? No. Hutchings? No. Cooper? No. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 131, 21 aye, 10 no.
Having received the affirmative vote of the majority of members elected to Senate, Senate File 19, developmental preschool funding, Senate File 23, Public Utilities, Energy Resource Procurement. Senate File 24, Public Service Commission, Integrated Resource Plans. Senate File 25, Reclamation and Decommissioning Costs. Senate File 41, Banking Division, Classification and Salary Exemptions. Senate File 42, Low Carbon Reliable Energy Standards Amendments. Senate File 52, Wyoming Stable Token Act Amendments. Senate File 53, 6 Judicial District Number of Judges. Senate File 57, Wyoming Adult Hearing Aid Program. Senate File 64, Mineral Royalties, Proportional Severance Tax Refunds. Senate File 69, Hospice Care Reimbursements. Senate File 72, Utility Donations. Senate File 73, Concealed Firearms Permit Eligibility. Senate File 74, Special Districts, Reversal of Dissolution for Noncompliance. Senate File 75, Omnibus Water Bill, Construction. Senate File 77, Homeland Defense Infrastructure Reporting and Investigating. Senate File 80, Solid Waste Management Definition Amendments. Senate File 82, Summer Vacation Preservation Act. Senate File 83, Revisers Bill. Senate File 86, School Safety and Security Funding. Senate File 89, Veterans Ad Valorem Exemption Amount. Senate File 94, an act regarding compelled speech and state employers. Senate File 96, Trust and Bank Assets and Bankruptcy Clarification. Senate File 97, Prohibition on Distribution of Unsolicited Ballot Forms. Senate File 98, Statute of Limitations, Medical Procedures on Minors. Senate File 102, Foreign Property Ownership, Critical Infrastructure. Senate File 105, Wyoming Second Amendment Financial Privacy Act. Senate File 109, Prohibit Red Flag Gun Seizure Act. Senate File 111, Mule and Whitetail Deer Separate Hunting Season. Senate File 120, Driver's Licenses, Unauthorized Alien Restrictions. Senate File 123, Minor Name Changes. Senate File 125, Parimutuel Wagering Activities Amendments. Senate File 128, Approval of Charter School. Senate File 130, Equality State Not Equity State Act. And Senate File 131, Regulatory Reduction Task Force 2 have passed the Senate. Senate File 51, having failed to receive the affirmative vote of the members elected to the Senate, Senate File 51 has failed to pass the Senate. Bills on third reading. Senate File 54, third reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 54, Homeowner Tax Exemption, sponsored by the Revenue Committee, an act relating to taxation.
There is an amendment. Can we have the amendment read in, please?
Senate File 54, third reading amendment number 1, page 2, lines 5 through 10, delete.
Senator Kinski.
Yeah, I had some exhibits that I turned in a couple hours ago. They haven't been passed out yet. I wonder if we can just lay this back till I get those exhibits out.
We'll lay it back to the end of the run. Thank you.
Thank you.
Senate File 68, third reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 68, Tangible Personal Property Tax Exemption, sponsored by Senator McEwen, an act relating to property taxes.
There is an amendment. We have the amendment read in, please.
Senate File 68, third reading amendment number 1, page 1, line 2, delete.
Senator Hicks.
Yeah, Mr. President, I move third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 68 and ask for your favorable consideration. Before I explain the amendment, you should have on your desk a handout of the fiscal impact associated with this amendment. So, Mr. Chairman, basically what this does is it deletes all the language that was previously in the bill and it brings it back to the one section that currently grants a $2,400 tangible personal property exemption, and it raises that to $20,000. Mr. Chairman, the reason I'm trying to get to that, I think it's important that if we're going to do tax relief, that we try to get that as broad and as small as narrow, that we encompass as many people as possible. Where this would really probably have the highest amount of impact is on those very small businesses. And also, according to staff, when you look at that fiscal note, It's not substantive, so if you look through that, total impact to K through 12 funding is about $4.3 million a year. The ad valorem taxes for the local taxing, and these are statewide aggregate numbers, about $7 million in 26 and about $7 million in 27. What I've been told by staff is the majority of this tax is basically tax on trailer houses, and that's considered personal property taxes within the state of Wyoming. So, you know, these are going to tend to be folks that have those facilities, but it's just a way to say, look, we're raising that 2,400 that we raised a few years ago, and we're raising it to 20,000. It's targeted at those entities, small business people across the state, that they would be able to basically get a $20,000 exemption for all that personal property. So stand for any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Further discussion, Senator Scott.
Yeas and nays, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, or Mr. President. I remember when I worked on getting the de minimis in place in general, I had numbers of how many tax accounts there are and kind of some brackets of, you know, large taxpayer, small taxpayer. My recollection is that a very small number of taxpayers actually pay the lion's share of this tax. I just don't have those numbers, and I was wondering if there's been any breakout of just how many tax accounts would be affected. And then if you've had any feedback from the county assessors and their concerns with administration.
Further discussion? Further discussion? Seeing none. Yeas and nays have been called. We are voting on third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 68. The clerk will call the roll.
Third reading amendment number 1, Senate File 68, roll call. Anderson? Aye. Baldwin? Aye. Barlow? Aye. Beitman? Aye. Boner? Aye. Bouchard? No. Brennan? Aye. Case? Aye. Cooper? Aye. Dockstetter? Aye. Ellis? Aye. French? Aye. Furphy? Aye. Garou? No. Hicks? Aye. Hutchings? Aye. Ide? Aye. Jones? Aye. Kinski? Aye. Cole? Aye. Landon? Aye. Larson? Aye. McEwen? Aye. Nethercott? Aye. Pappas? Aye. Rothfuss? Aye. Salazar? Aye. Schuler? Aye. Scott? Aye. Steinmetz? Aye. President Driscoll?
Aye.
Aye. Closing vote. Closing. Vote close on the amendment. 29 aye, 2 no.
By your vote, third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 68 is passed the Senate. We're back on the bill. Any further discussion? Seeing none. Having received we got to go to, having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall Senate File 68 tangible personal property tax exemption pass the Senate? Chief Clerk will call the roll.
Senate File 68, third reading roll call. Anderson? No. Baldwin? Aye. Barlow? Aye. Beitman? Aye. Boner? Aye. Bouchard? Aye. Brennan? Aye. Case? No. Cooper? Aye. Dockstetter? Aye. Ellis? Aye. French? Aye. Furphy? Aye. Garou? Aye. Hicks? Aye. Hutchings? Aye. Ide? Aye. Jones? No. Kinski? Aye. Cole? No. Landon? Aye. Larson? Aye. McEwen? Aye. Nethercott? Aye. Pappas? No. Rothfuss? Aye. Salazar? Aye. Schuler? No. Scott? Aye. Steinmetz? Aye. President Driscoll?
Aye.
Aye. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 68, 25 aye, 6 no.
Having received the affirmative vote of the majority of members elected to the Senate, Senate File 68, tangible personal property tax exemption, has passed the Senate. Senate File 99, third reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 99, Chloe's Law, Children Gender Change Prohibition, sponsored by Senator Bouchard, an act relating to public health and safety.
Discussion. Seeing none. 99, Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, on and against 99, I understand the intention here, but at the end of the day, this legislation provides an opportunity for the state to insert itself between parents and their children in consultation with the health care providers of those parents and children. This seems very antithetical, candidly, to what this chamber and what this legislature have pushed for in recent years, regardless of how you feel about the specifics of the healthcare procedures. You have parents and their children making decisions with healthcare providers that this legislature has felt apparently is inappropriate or potentially inappropriate. And somehow now the legislature is going to insert itself into that decision-making process. After all we've heard about parents' choice, parents' rights, parents' decisions, healthcare freedom, preservation of individual rights with regard to healthcare choices, ensuring that parents choose what's best for their children, over and over again. For as long as I remember in this legislature, Mr. President, you and I came in at the same time, and that's been the theme, that's been the mantra. Here we have a bill that says, except this time, legislature knows best, we have an opinion on this, we have strongly held beliefs, and we want to insert ourselves between that decision. It doesn't matter what the healthcare provider says, it doesn't matter what the parent says, and it doesn't matter what the child wants anymore with this bill. Just this bill, just this one time. So again, Mr. President, I don't know how we got to the point where a bill like this is even being considered by this legislature, because it is so anathema to the values of individual freedom, individual rights, parent choice, and healthcare freedom. It violates all of those, Mr. President, clearly and directly. I believe we should resist this bill. Even those among this Senate that feel concerned and sympathize with the intent of the legislation and sympathize with the motivation behind the legislation, I'd urge you all to step back and think about this legislation from the standpoint of individual rights and individual freedom and healthcare freedom, and ask the question as I have, does this align with any of those values? For me, Mr. President, the answer is no, on and against the bill.
Senator Landon.
Thank you, Mr. President. I can't match the skills of my desk mate here, but I wanted to rise and help the Senate know why I'm against this bill. I agree with my colleague. There's a lot of irony and inconsistency in what we do these days. That's really not what this is. What it is for me is two things. I counted them up this morning. I received 14 different letters from 14 different healthcare providers in my community. Not the surgeon, not the doctors. I'm talking about professionals in the healthcare fields who wrote to me to say, this is not a place where state government belongs. Mr. President, I agree. I think it makes a bigger state government that's more intrusive. Now we want to get into our therapists and our counselors' offices. We've intruded the doctors' offices, and we want to get in the bedrooms. You know, pretty soon, Mr. President, this is going to be an all-encompassing, pretty authoritarian place down here. I just think this one goes too far. At some point, we've got to get some common sense about the rights of our parents and our families. That's why I'm against this bill, Mr. President.
Senator Scott.
Mr. President, this is one where we need to get some common sense, I think, about how the world really works. Mr. President, you're talking about a very profound change for the individuals that are involved. You're not talking about medical emergencies. You're talking about a very profound change in the kind of life that an individual leads. And the individual ought to be the one that makes the choice. But the problem here is that as children, as minors, Mr. President, these individuals do not have the maturity and the understanding of how life really is to make that choice. So the real effect of this bill is to say that choice should not be made on children, for children, or by children. It's a choice for adults to make. And, Mr. President, from my point of view, having this pushed on children from the outside, and it's often what happens, and children, as they go through puberty, are confused about these kind of issues. It really, I think, amounts to child abuse. And so I think we ought to pass this bill because it will reserve that decision to the individuals that are involved once they're old enough, Mr. President, to make a competent decision.
Senator Case.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. You know, Mr. President, children are a miracle. They literally are God's work. And Mr. Chairman, I hear that God doesn't make mistakes. And I know that's true. My faith is really strong, Mr. President. But there's a great variability in our humankind. Why are people born with diabetes or develop diabetes? Why are they taller? Why are they have different maladies? I had a nephew with 3 kidneys. Some people have 1 kidney. Your appendix is all over the place. People are different when they're born. There are 4 recognized kind of syndromes that are kind of a blending of sexes, Mr. President. They're recognized syndromes. I think those might be the syndromes that are kind of talked about in the bill as being exceptions. But there's also, if you read the literature, there are variabilities. There are people that don't have the chromosomal aspects of the syndromes, like Sawyer syndrome, De La Chapelle syndrome, Klinefelter syndrome, or Turner syndrome, that don't have the exact genetic makeup, but exhibit everything about those syndromes. And we're learning more all the time, Mr. President, and our people are changing. My favorite sandwich in grade school, you'll think this isn't relevant, peanut butter sandwich. Peanut butter and jelly. Love peanut butter and jelly. Do you know that a lot of schools don't even let kids bring peanut butter sandwiches to school anymore? Because peanut allergies are so rampant in our society. That's why you don't get them on airplanes anymore. What is going on? Why that change? Why are there more people like this? Have you read about the fact that plastics have chemicals in them that mimic hormones? And all of this is happening when this sexual development occurs with the fertilization and God's miracle, Mr. President. But it's not black and white. It's not X and Y. And we get great variability, Mr. President. We can see it in other things. Asthma is more prevalent among children than it has been ever. Gluten intolerance, belly problems, all sorts of things they've learned about how your digestive system works in the influx of bacteria and things, Mr. President. But the ingestion of plastics could also be part of that cause hormonal changes. So I'm coming to the point that this is not a made-up fad. This is, for some people, I suppose it could be. But you have to trust that you're making a mistake by going down this road and doing something about medical conditions that we learn more about every day, Mr. President. Our Constitution is clear with the Healthcare Freedom Amendment that we passed. It's very clear. The first thing says each competent adult should have the right to make his or her own healthcare decisions. The parent, guardian, or legal representative of any other natural person shall have the right to make healthcare decisions for that person. That's the number one aspect of the Healthcare Freedom Act. And yes, like all of the amendments we put in, sometimes there are qualifiers. It says the legislature may determine reasonable and necessary restrictions, Mr. President. This is not reasonable and necessary. That's where we're failing. That's why this will never pass a court challenge, Mr. President. God doesn't make mistakes, but he gives us variability, Mr. President. He also gave us minds, and he gave us this Constitution, which is higher than this law. And I ask you to vote against this bill. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Biden.
Thank you, Mr. President. On and for this bill, it's like the good speaker in front of me said, this is common sense. Let's get back to common sense here. This is a big deal. And to talk about healthcare and what constitutes healthcare, I'm sure all those maladies we heard about a couple hundred years ago could be treated by a good old-fashioned bloodletting and leaching. It was common practice back then, and now we look back on it and laugh and kind of cringe at what they thought was healthcare and what they did to people. 100 years from now, I think history will look back on this time at this issue and say, oh my God, how did they let this happen to those children? So again, common sense, we need to stop this, and I'll just leave it at that for now.
Senator Hutchins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On and for the bill. I sat through committee and listened to the young girl that had a feeling when she was young, I think it was around 13, Chloe, that she thought she wanted to be a boy. So they started the puberty blockers on her. She said she'll forever have the deep voice because she decided not to transition fully. She'll have the protruding Adam's apple. She has breasts that have been removed, I think at the age of 15, that she says she has to bandage every single day because they leak. I asked her, and I asked, I think the doctor in the committee, if they knew of anybody who's ever changed a man or a young child from a boy to a girl or vice versa. And no one could say that they had. These experimental treatments on these children, the mutilation will last them a lifetime. They'll be perpetual parents. I ask that you vote yes on this bill for the children, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Further discussion, Senator Bouchard.
Thank you, Mr. President. On for the bill. You know, we've done a lot of discussion about adolescents and teenagers that are confused. But what we haven't talked about is the ones that don't have voices because they're 5 years old. You can see out there, if you start looking around, you'll find that there are 5-year-olds that they're doing this to because a little boy or a little girl decides that they want to be the opposite sex. And they start using chemicals and hormones on them at a very young age. You vote against this bill, and you're voting against those 5-year-olds that are probably crying out for help because they have some kind of mental health issue that they need help with. And instead, we're sending them to the butchers. That's real. That's not me making this up. That's not just something that's on a whim. They're taking little kids that can't make up their mind on what pajamas they want to wear. And they're letting them change their sex as young as 5 years old. Vote for the kids.
Seeing none. Question being called. Having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall Senate File 99, Chloe's Law General Change Prohibition, pass the Senate? The Chief Clerk will call the roll.
Senate File 99, third reading roll call. Anderson? No. Baldwin? Aye. Barlow? Aye. Beitman? Aye. Boner? Aye. Bouchard? Aye. Brennan? Aye. Case? No. Cooper? No. Dockstetter? Aye. Ellis? Aye. French? Aye. Furphy? Aye. Guru? No. Hicks? Aye. Hutchings? Aye. Ide? Aye. Jones? Aye. Kinski? Aye. Kolb? Aye. Landon? No. Larson? Aye. McEwen? Aye. Nethercott? Aye. Pappas? Aye. Rothfuss? No. Salazar? Aye. Schuler? Aye. Scott? Aye. Steinmetz? Aye. President Driscoll? Aye. Closing vote. Cooper? No to aye. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 99, 26 aye, 5 no.
Having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elect to Senate, Senate File 99, Chloe's Law, Children Gender Change Prohibition, has passed the Senate. Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
President, I move the Senate stand recessed until 1 p.m. 1 p.m.
Announcements. Senator Kinski.
Mr. President, your Senate Appropriations Committee meeting is scheduled for a meeting at noon, but due to a lack of work and the incredible efficiency of Senator Anderson on the work this morning, we will scrub the noon meeting, but we will meet again tomorrow at noon to consider re-referrals as received and referrals as received.
Senator Dockstader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Minerals will meet Wednesday upon noon recess, Wednesday, February 28th, Capitol Room Extension 4, to hear HB 141 State Land, Oil and Gas Lease Operator Retirement, HB 145 Open Banking Amendments, House Joint Resolution 3 engrossed support for local input in federal rulemaking. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Biden.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your committee number 3, Revenue, will meet in 15 minutes in Capitol Extension Room W6 and online to take up the following two House bills: House Bill 9, fuel tax licensee information deadline, and House Bill 179 engrossed, sales tax administration revisions.
Senator Landon.
Mr. President, looking ahead to tomorrow, your Committee 1 Judiciary will meet in W4 downstairs and online, 8 o'clock a.m. to take up House Bill 31 engrossed, Peace Officers, Records and Reporting, House Bill 30, Controlled Substances Act, Possession Amendments, and House Bill 29 engrossed, Cold Case Database and Investigations.
Thank you. You've heard the motion. Senator Baldwin.
That's okay. Thank you, Mr. President. I don't mind being last today. Your Committee Number 10, Labor, Health, and Social Services will meet tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. Your House Bill 148, Regulation of Surgical Abortion. One additional notice here is that this afternoon's actually started a half hour ago downstairs, room 53 and 54. The Federated Firefighters of Wyoming are sponsoring barbecue food if you're so inclined.
Thank you. You've heard the motion. All in favor, say aye. Those opposed, no. Senate shall stand recessed until 1 p.m.